Thanks, everybody. I'm delighted to be here today and share my journey and research into the QNAP NAS devices and supply chain vulnerabilities. Completed the research a few years ago, and today I have the opportunity to share it all with you. So let's talk a little bit about me. Who am I? So my name is Yoni Ramon. I'm a very long time hacker, penetration tester, focusing on mobile web application and IoT. At my free time, I'm very active on BugCrowd as a bounty hunter, security researcher. Was listed in BugCrowd top 100 researchers a few times. At my current role, I'm the red team manager at Tesla. I've been a staff security engineer at Tesla for the past 10 years, managing everything from red team, application security, and code review. I'm a member of Cyberella advisory board since Alon founded the company, providing in-depth security expertise to our customers. And I'm also a bonsai master in training. So if you like bonsai or gardening, feel free to reach out after the talk. My email is down in the chat. So what's on the agenda for today? First, I'm going to go over quickly what is software supply chain. Then we're going to pivot to what's QNAP, what kind of product they produce, and who the customers are. After that, I'm going to share some of my research with you guys and discuss about the finding of the vulnerability from the researcher. And then we're going to conclude with recommendation, best practices. And if time permits, we can go for a quick Q&A. Okay. So what's supply chain? It's a very traditional definition, from delivering a product all the way from manufacturing through the retail store all the way to the customer. But today we're going to talk a little bit more about software supply chain that is very similar in nature, but except of materials and manufacturing and retail, we're going to talk about code, developers, and data. Which led me, why do we all need to care about that? It's a good question. And I'm sure we all know we don't live in silo. We manage pretty big companies. A lot of our source code or data will live somewhere on a Git repository or at a third party, which could be part of a broader infrastructure or a SaaS provider. We also use a ton of compiler tools, base container, base images that our company did not produce and consumed by third parties. So I want to share a few case studies or examples before we're going to deep dive into my research, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. I'm pretty sure you guys, everybody on the panel, are all very familiar with SolarWinds and what happened there. If you're not, a group of hackers were able to taint SolarWinds, one of SolarWinds' product. Then they ship an update to 20,000 customers with the malicious code, which create a backdoor in the network and allow access to the hackers. Last week, if you read online, GitHub had a very interesting vulnerability. One of their third parties exposed authentication token. It was a privileged authentication token that allowed the attacker to commit malicious code into private GitHub repositories and taint the code. Also, from the past few weeks, a lot of NPM packages were tainted with malicious code and pushed to customers and vendors. And last but not least, we had a big incident with Kronos. If you're not familiar with Kronos, it's an HR software to facilitate payments for employees, contractors. It actually contains tons of private user information, which lead us to my research today about QNAP. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about how from my own NAS device I was able to hack some Fortune 500 companies. So before we're going to deep dive into what QNAP is, I want to start my story about how I actually got my QNAP device and what led me to the research. So about 5 years ago, my roommate here in San Francisco decided that he would like to first store a huge amount of media files, such as videos and photos, with the ability to stream all that content to our TV with very low latency. And he want to make it in the most secure way he can, while also enabling his family members to access the files remotely. So as a good security engineer, I never let any unknown device on my network. So the first thing that I did, I asked for his permission to poke at the device before we're gonna fully install it and utilize it in our network. After probably a few days of research, I was able to find many vulnerabilities. All of them were reported to QNAP directly. Most of them are very common vulnerabilities like command injection, SQL injection, authentication bypass, subdomain takeovers, and much, much more, which we're going to talk about soon. So what is QNAP? QNAP is a Taiwanese company that specialize in NAS devices or cloud NAS devices today. If you're not familiar, NAS devices are a network attached storage. It's a file-level computer that is connected all the time to your network and provide access to many different types of clients, such as your smart TV, SMB clients, you name it, QNAP can connect to it. But QNAP as a company are not limited only to file sharing. They migrated also to the IT market, providing virtualization, storage management, surveillance application like security camera based on AI, and actually much, much more. And QNAP is quite unique in that sense because they don't target one specific customer. They're targeting the entire market, from individuals like myself, small to medium businesses, and also I've seen tons of Fortune 500 companies using their product. They have a very, very broad line of product that will suit the needs of every customer. And the feature that I was focusing on my latest research was the help desk widget, which company installed on most QNAP devices. And it's actually a great feature to help you facilitate support tickets and working with the support. So, second. So I want to talk briefly about my previous research. So I submitted many vulnerabilities to QNAP in the past. All of them received many CVEs. In this small code snippet, I just want to share a small vulnerable shell exit functionality that takes user input as the message parameter without sanitizing it. And of course, it's vulnerable to command injection. So for the POC, in the report that I had to send to QNAP for that, I written a small Python script to fully exploit the vulnerability. And as you can see here, it's a very simple code just to make sure that QNAP can reproduce the vulnerabilities. I'm just sending an HTTP header with my HTTP request with my payload, and I get a shell back. But this is not what I want to focus today. After reporting probably 10 or 15 different vulnerabilities similar to that, I decided to stop. There's no point in reporting more vulnerabilities to them with similar nature. And I decided to actually search for something a bit different, maybe something that could lead me back to the QNAP network or to their customer, or something that's going to be a little bit more exciting than another reverse shell on my product. So the first thing I did after receiving the device was I update the device to the latest version. And the first thing that I noticed is the new help desk widget, which came pre-installed on my device. It was written in PHP, which makes it very simple to investigate. You don't need any reverse engineering skills. QNAP as a company provide you with SSH access to the device, so you can log in as root, dump the file system, open your favorite editor, and examine the PHP file. In the screenshot here, you can actually see how it looks. You can raise support tickets here. The interesting part is the diagnostic tools, because they actually allow you to do diagnostic on the fly, and all of that will be attached to the ticket. And you can go back and forth with the help desk until you're able to resolve the issue. So I dumped the PHP file. I started looking into the source code, and the first thing I noticed was API keys and a secret key that were hard-coded in the help desk application source code. So the next logical thing to do as a researcher, of course, I'm going to Google search what I found. I'm not sure if the API keys are valid. I'm not sure if it's working. I'm not sure actually what it's for even. So a quick Google search led me to the supplier that QNAP was using in order to facilitate the RESTful API for the help desk functionality. Reading through the documentation quickly, the first thing that popped to mind, they have authentication, but they don't have any authorization, and they don't have the notion of role-based access control at all. So if my keys are valid, they are probably the keys to the kingdom and can give me access to the entire RESTful API. Luckily, the documentation were great, so I was able to very quickly understand how to use the API, what kind of functionality is available through that API, and what can I do with the keys if they are valid. So the first thing I did after was to make sure that the API key and secret key are valid, and they were. With those keys, I was able to access the RESTful API and start dumping data. And of course, I found private user information there, but that's not what we're here for. With that private user information, I had access to the tickets, to the emails, and I'm actually able to search for tickets that are associated with specific emails or domains. So in this case, I can start searching for something like, hey, did Twitter.com submitted any tickets to the portal? Or did Facebook or Google or any big Fortune 500 company? And I don't want to spoil everything, but my conclusion was that the help desk support portal is used for a lot more than just opening up support tickets. And we're going to see that in the upcoming slides. So let's deep dive into the vulnerabilities. This is the actual screenshot of the PHP source code. And as you can see in the screenshot, there's API key and a secret key. Of course, their mask can already been rotated. But below that, there is another interesting URL that led me to the third-party supplier who built that API and code for it. The name of that vendor is Kyoko, and they're pretty big here. So with Google help and the documentation from the vendor side, I was able to find this quote, which is a very interesting quote to see from a third party or vendor that supply API for big companies. Basically, it means that this type of RESTful API support authentication, but don't support any role-based access control. And if you think about it, this is exactly what the product need. They have many different type of users, like myself, that open support tickets, like the help desk users that need to debug, and the administrator that need to manage their platform. So if there's no notion of role-based access control, that means I can dump the entire data out of that platform. So I started looking into the tickets. I was able to access one of the tickets, found that the tickets ID are sequential, so I can actually iterate very quickly through the tickets and pretty much dump whatever I want from the tickets on the API. So in the ticket content, I stumbled across a few interesting things. The first was, of course, all the username that raised the support tickets and the email addresses that were associated with them. I also had access to the ticket content, and I'm not just talking about read access. I had read access, I had write access, and I could reply to the customers as well. The interesting part comes in the attachments. Part of the ticket content contained the attachment ID. The ID is not sequential in this case, it's a GUID, you cannot brute force it. And in order to download the ticket attachment, you must have the GUID for that attachment first. So now that I have the ticket content, the ticket attachment GUIDs, I can start dumping the ticket attachments and see if there's anything interesting there. So more data. Armed with all that information, now I'm able to search for specific cases or tickets opened by specific domains or email addresses and search if they upload any attachments. And what I found was pretty alarming. I found two types of attachment. One of them, and I'm sure you're all familiar with that, is full-blown TCP dumps. So TCP dump is a gold mine for people like me or for attacker researchers. It contains everything that is in clear text over the network, which means in this case, HTTP passwords, FTP passwords, URL, host names, and everything that's in the clear. So from here, I can launch much more sophisticated attack. But to my surprise, that was not the only thing I stumbled across. They actually use this portal to facilitate receiving vulnerabilities from the public, like from researchers like myself. So one of the more interesting attachments were 0 days that were completely unpatched. So now I have access to TCP dumps and to an exploit repository, which means I don't need to do any more research in QNAP. I can start dumping 0 days and launch them against the customers that I already know using the platform because I have access to all their tickets and attachments. So yeah, in this picture, you can imagine my face, figuring out that I have a very, very broad access to ton of private user information, TCP dumps, and an exploit repository. The remediation timeline was pretty fast from the vendor. I initially reported the vulnerabilities to QNAP in May. Immediately, they escalated the issue to the security team. About a week after, they rotated the API keys and secrets. And I think they even took one step extra and completely decommissioned that API and moved to a safer platform. Again, QNAP issued another CVE for this and offered me reward. It could either be in the form of another NAS device from QNAP or $500. Because I've submitted so many CVEs previously to QNAP, I decided to go with the $500. I don't need fourth or fifth NAS at my home. And now I want to talk about some of the conclusion and recommendation from what I observed. I think if we want to try to protect ourselves from these type of scenarios, because we're all going to be susceptible at some point. We're all working with suppliers. We're all working with third parties. And in order to make sure that we keep our data safe, we must have a very robust third party or a supplier risk assessment program, which help us assess if the vendor is spending enough effort, time in security, and if it's matching our expectation. Also, we can figure out if they are compliant with local regulation and requirements, and to make sure that we decide on the right third party for us, also based on the requirement and the design. I think this is a perfect example of a supplier that was actually the worst supplier you can get for this type of operation, because in the design phase, you already have many different type of roles that need to access that RESTful API. And if the RESTful API don't offer any role-based access, it's clearly the wrong solution here. Also, keep in mind that anybody with this type of knowledge can launch an extremely sophisticated attack. And I'm not just talking about phishing. I have access to the API, so I can respond to QNAP customer. I can raise more support tickets with them, and I can actually ask them to execute packages in order to further debug the issues that they're experiencing. So I can give them some malicious file to install instead and gain footprint of the network. And keep in mind, they trust me. They think I'm QNAP because I'm connected to the QNAP help desk server, so they don't know who's behind it. And there's thousands of suppliers to big organizations today. So I'm actually not surprised seeing something like that in the wild. And we need to do a lot in order to protect ourselves, because we're only going to accumulate more and more suppliers and more third parties as well. From the application security standpoint, I think it's clear that product security and application security should be mandatory alongside the product lifecycle. In this case, they shipped a vulnerable device to my home, and they had to patch it after the fact. But in many cases, that might not be even possible, because if the vulnerability is in the hardware, they need to replace the hardware, and that's not something they can do after delivering the product. So it's better to have a very robust application security from the get-go and not after the fact. Second thing, never store hard-coded keys in your code, specifically not code that you plan to ship to customer, but also not in your source control, not in your GitHub repositories or anywhere. There's many ways to actually retrieve secrets in runtime securely without embedding them in the code. We're not going to deep dive into the many ways. If you want, feel free to reach out to me after. But my takeaway is just do not hard code any keys into your code. In this case, it was clear that role-based access control should be designed. They built a feature that require multiple roles, but they only had one. If they had an application security team, that could be avoided with the proper threat modeling and design. Which lead me to my next point, always perform penetration testing on an ongoing basis with trusted partners like us or your own team. In this case, I'm 99.9% sure any penetration tester will be able to find those issues even without penetration testing, just by a quick code review even, and make sure to fix it before shipping it to production. And my last advice to everybody is to have a very robust bounty program or vulnerability disclosure program. That's the only way that you'll be able to receive vulnerabilities from the public, reward them, and make sure that you're not going to post 0 days in some hacking forum, the dark web. And if you need any advice about how to set up a bounty program or who's the best platform to use, definitely reach out to me. I have a lot of experience with bounties via HackerOne or Bugcrowd, so I'll be more than happy to share some of my expertise in that part.